Glad you're here. We're going to get started in just a moment. While you're here, before we officially get started, please do go ahead and drop into the chat. Where are you coming in from and what are you working on? I'm also going to go ahead and hit the mute all button. So Dinty and Sharla, you'll need to unmute yourselves again. Yay, there we go. Cool, cool. Welcome, everybody. Please do drop into the chat and select that everyone in meeting button. Please do drop into the chat. Where are you coming in from? What are you currently writing? What are you currently working on? So great to have you here. We are so glad that you're joining us for the last Writer's Bridge of the year. By the way, we do also have a YouTube channel. I know we mention that in every single email that we send you, but I also know that I have missed many things that are in many emails. So just remember, you can watch the entire complete history of the Writer's Bridge. We've got 3 years worth of episodes now, if you go over to our YouTube channel. And usually the recording of the current Writer's Bridge goes up the next day or the day after. So welcome, everybody. We are so glad you are here. We're going to keep letting people in, but we're so glad you're here today to talk about writing in a changing world, creating and publishing in uncertain times. So how can we stay focused on our work amid challenging news and events, staying present while we bring our whole selves to the page? We're going to discuss tonight how publishing is shifting both as a market and as a practice. And our special guest is the creator of Brevity, the second longest running online literary magazine. Boy, did I have fun looking that one up. He has watched the literary world evolve over 4 decades. He is also my mentor, my colleague, my friend, and a damn funny guy. But before we introduce him, Sharla, what is happening in the wonderful world of Craft Talks webinars? What can we get into before the end of the year?
Great. So we have one more webinar, and it's with Jane Friedman, and it's on how to get an unbiased explanation of the self-publishing, hybrid publishing, and paid publishing services to make the best decision for yourself and for your book. That is $25, and the registration ends an hour before the live event, which is tomorrow. And then our next Craft Talk event for 2025, our first one, is seminar. It's a 2-day seminar, Craft a Stronger Memoir, Identifying and Fixing the 5 Most Common Craft Issues with Katie Bannon. It's $99 to join us. It's going to be running January 4th and 11th. And if you can't make the first one, we will be sending out a replay before the second one, so you have a chance to catch up. And I'll go ahead and pop those in the chat. And Allison, what's coming up for you?
Well, I am so excited, actually. I have quite a few things coming up. So a lot of people have asked me, can we work one-on-one? And right now I am not taking on a lot of one-on-one clients, but in Santa Fe in March, I will be hosting, and actually it's the first week of April, starts the last day of March, I will be hosting an independent study class where I'm basically working one-on-one with every person who's there with an eye towards what does your book need to get to publication? How is that going to get yourself closer into the world? I'll drop the link for that into the chat. And then also, I have to say, I am going to be co-teaching with our special guest, Dinty W a 3-day writing intensive in January. It's a virtual intensive called Memoir, Large and Small. It is like a mini conference. I really love teaching it, and it's always such a lot of fun. We hope you guys will join us at any of these events to kickstart your writing year and get yourself into the world. If you're just joining us, please do drop into the chat. Where are you coming in from? What are you working on? And Sharla, would you introduce our amazing guest?
Yes, it would be my pleasure. Dinty W. Moore is author of the memoirs Between Panic and Desire and To Hell With It, one of my favorite titles for a memoir, and the writing guides Crafting the Personal Essay and The Mindful Writer, among many other books. He has been published in Harpers, the New York Times, Sunday Magazine, the Philadelphia Inquirer, and many others. And he teaches workshops and retreats around the world, including in Ireland, Italy, Portugal, and Mexico. Dinty just lives outside of the edge of Philadelphia, and he's deathly afraid of polar bears.
For good reason.
Dinty, why do you fear polar bears?
Because they are very, very mean and very, very tricky. I worked at a zoo for quite a while and had experiences with them. And do not let down your guard if you're near a polar bear.
Good to know.
You know,
Yeah.
I love hearing this because I always thought it was just something funny that you had in your bio, and it's really cool to know that this is like a legit thing. And Cora points out in the
Do we
chat
have
they are
time?
also carnivorous.
It's like a 7-sentence story. Do we have time?
I'd love to
We
hear.
totally have time.
Okay.
Please tell us about the polar bears.
Yeah.
One of my jobs at the zoo was to feed the bears, and the bears were different bears were out there in those different moats. And behind the moat, there was where the bears went at night. Their little private quarters with TVs and lounge chairs. And you'd go in through the back where nobody could see you. You would open a door, there'd be bars, and you'd throw the food into the polar bears, to the bears. And the other bears were all like the brown bears, the Sumatran sun bears, the black bears were all like, hey, great, here's my food. I'm really happy. The polar bears would hear you coming, would hide just to the side of their side of the door. And when I opened the door, their paw would come out, just boom, just trying to get me every time. They didn't want killing me was more important than eating, something I can't understand because I like food. They were just, I mean, I have mixed feelings about zoos now. Certainly mixed feelings about keeping animals in cages and displays, even big moats like we had at the Erie Zoo. But most of the animals sort of got used to the routine, and if you were feeding them, they were like, okay, dude, cool. Not the polar bears. They were after you day and night.
They remembered.
So the polar bears are actively trying to kill us at all times.
At all times. Even
Wow.
when they look like they're not, they're just biding their time, looking for a chance.
Yeah. Smart.
Wow, that's incredible. And as Stephanie points out in the chat, they are justifiably mad about their habitat going away. So there you have it. Global warming maddens the polar bears and endangers all of us. We all need to be a little bit more conscious.
Thank you, Stephanie. That's good context.
Yeah. I'm going to ask the first question.
The first question was about the polar bears. You're going to ask this.
Right. That's true. That was the most important question, but I have a second question.
Precision is important.
And I think this is particularly interesting to me because of working at Creative Nonfiction Foundation. You started Brevity Online in 1997. Is that correct? Like when you started it, why did you start it and how was it received?
Sometimes I want to clean this story up, but the truth is it was started as a lark. I kind of wanted to learn how to make websites. This is the 1997. Most of us were just discovering websites. I was a bit of a geek and wanted to learn how to do it. I said, okay, well, I'll start a magazine. And I was interested in creative nonfiction. And I thought, well, I'll make it really, really short creative nonfiction because then I won't have to read that much. And flash fiction was pretty popular then, and nobody else was doing flash nonfiction. So I just said, okay, I'll try this. It was received slowly, like anything. But the first issue, I had 15 friends who visited. The second issue, maybe 45 or 50 friends. And then a few of their friends showed up. And then it got mentioned at a few writers groups, AWP, I think maybe Writers Digest had a listing for it. And it popped up and we got like hundreds of people who visited and dozens of people who submitted. And it just grew and grew and grew. And we are, the magazine and the blog together are huge. But we have tens of thousands of subscribers and hundreds of thousands of visitors. And it is truly international because the English-speaking world extends so far now. It's burdened out of anything I'd ever dreamed or imagined.
I love it. I love it. I've been involved with Brevity since 2012, I believe, possibly 2013, and have just really enjoyed seeing how the magazine has grown, seeing how the blog has grown. Now, Dinty, in terms of Brevity submissions over the years, have you seen writing evolve? Like, are there styles or topics that come and go?
Well, the before we get to styles and topics, just the writing has become so much more sophisticated. Like I said, the creative nonfiction itself. I mean, I could go into an hour lecture about the fact that it goes back to Montaigne, but it really goes back further to the Greek philosophers, the idea of personal writing. But creative nonfiction in the literary world was still very ill-defined in 1997. So not many people were doing it, and the people who were doing it were still trying to figure out what it was. So it tended to be narratives, stories that read like short stories. And because it was flash, it would be flash nonfictions that read like flash fictions. 3 characters, 1 setting, something happened, and then it ends. That's really changed over the years because creative nonfiction or literary nonfiction or lyric nonfiction, it's just, there's so much going on in the nonfiction world now. The poets got really interested. And then the fiction writers were like, well, what are the nonfiction writers and poets up to over there? They seem to be having a good time. So the fiction writers got interested. And then, younger writers who were just learning about literary or creative writing in college, in the 2000s, the aughts and the 2010s, and they're discovering it at the beginning of their careers and really throwing themselves into it. So we're getting really, really sophisticated. And by sophisticated, I mean, everything from the lyric, the experimental, the hermit crab, voice, all these things are being done in short flash nonfiction that weren't being done early on. In terms of subject matter or topics, I think it's become very much a place for people to explore not just their childhoods. And I've written a lot about my childhood, so I don't say that despairingly or disparagingly, but it's not just memoir about childhood in very short form. People are exploring the world. People are exploring political issues. People are exploring issues of health, humanity, gender disparity, racial disparity, all of these sort of, I don't like the word political because it's not political in terms of politics, but it's political in terms of how do human beings survive in this world, interact in this world, and what is the human side of these global issues? That's where it's political. People are looking at the human side of some amazing global issues. And that's not new, but it keeps growing, it keeps gaining steam. And as of yesterday, it's still gaining steam.
Yeah, for sure. Have you seen, let me phrase this a different way. What are the biggest challenges in these turbulent times is to stay focused on our writing? What do you advise to people who are like polar bears, I guess, who are having a hard time staying, positive about the world and focused on their work?
It's a 2-part problem because social media itself created a problem for writers. Writers love words, and writers love to communicate, and writers love short, pithy, fun chatter. And suddenly you could do it online. And so for years and years and years and years, and boy, I'm guilty of this, playing on Twitter for a while, making jokes on Facebook for a while, seeing what other people were up to and what was funny going on over in this Facebook group, started to eat into people's writing time because it's a little addictive. And I don't want to get too much into US politics here, and then things got really, really tense, difficult, and angry in America, at least. I know there's international audience here, but probably not just America, but America's what
I can tell you from my conversations with crew members on the ship I'm currently on. Things are very tense in the Philippines. Things are very tense in India. And my husband's British, and things are very tense there.
Okay,
I mean, we as Americans are not alone in this.
Yeah. So the draw and the distraction of of what's going on in the world, much of it coming to us through social media, but not all of it, has gotten even stronger. Sharla, did you ask me for some solutions? I
Yeah,
mean, this,
you
this is
have.
this is gonna sound very glib, but it's also true. I mean, I've gone on forced fasts of media of all sorts. I used to watch TV news all the time. I used to surf political websites all the time. I have just shut that down,
Mhm.
both for my mental health and also for my writing health. I'm, in addition to all the other weird things that I'm a Buddhist, and this is going to sound even more glib, but it's also true. The best way to do it, and by it I mean say I'm going to think about my writing right now and not let those other things in, is to say to yourself, I'm going to do that. You
Mm.
won't succeed, but if you wake up every day for the next month and say, today, I'm going to let less of that other noise and shouting into my life and just focus more time on my writing, you will fail every day at keeping it all out, but you will keep more of it out every day. And at the end of the month, you go, oh, you know what? I'm actually doing a better job now than I was on December 17th
Mhm.
of not letting all of that fall down on top of me. You don't have to be a Buddhist to do that by any means. It's sort of like, what's that saying? Who we are is 99% of how we spend our time. And
Mhm.
I'm not immune to all the distractions and addictions, but we do have a lot of control over how we spend our time.
Mhm.
So you just have to assert that control.
I love that. Set that intention. Speak it out loud. You'll remind yourself.
Yeah, speak it out loud.
Right.
Repetition is very, very useful. Just your body kind of get your body / mind, which is all the same thing, kind of gets in a habit. If you say it 4 or 5 days in a row, pretty soon it's sort of saying itself for you. And I'm not pretending it's easy and it's like, and look, it's solved. You're still going to
Right.
be you're still going to be wrestling with it 2, 3, 4, 5 months later, unless the world changes. But you're going to be winning more battles.
I agree, and I've just started practicing something. So there's a book about French parenting called Bringing Up Bebe, and I actually just read about it. And one of the things they advise parents is the pause. So before you react to your child, before you rush to feed them, or rush to hold them, or rush to cuddle them, or rush to solve their problem, you're supposed to pause for just a moment to let the child get used to assessing the situation, as well as you being ready to help them as needed. And I was like, I wonder if this pause would help me. And so I pick up my phone and I pause and I go, wait a second, why am I picking up the phone? Oh, I want the comfort of scrolling Reddit and looking at other people's problems that are not mine. Is this actually going to help me? And, the same with like, I pick up the computer and take a little pause. Okay, what am I actually here to do? I'm not here to surf the internet. So why don't I go ahead and turn the internet off so that I can start writing first? And then later I can surf the internet as a little treat. And just this idea of pausing before engaging has really been helping me with processing the tension in the world and going, okay, is this something I can currently take action on? Maybe it is, maybe it's not. But if it's not, I'm not going to wallow in it and feel crappy about it. I'm going to keep my focus to the things that I can have a positive effect on it. Dinty, we go into our little rooms and we type and we hope that one day someone will read it. Publishing takes a really long time. Why do we need to keep doing this? What does writing offer the world? What do we have to offer the world?
Or, let's ask me the easy questions, why don't you? Um,
Yes, exactly. Dinty, tell us, why should we write? Why does it matter? Why should we keep doing it?
um, I am a powerful proponent of writing for audience. I believe that we're writing because we're going to get our words out there, and we're going to somehow our words are going to become public, which is the definition of publishing. Words become public. And publishing isn't a New York City corporation. Publishing is just how do our words reach the public. I'm a strong proponent of writing for publication, for eyeballs, to reach other people. But even before you get there, one of the reasons to keep writing is to survive this tumultuous, confusing, heartbreaking world. It's to me, writing is a form of self-care. It forces me to slow down, and I'm sort of piggybacking on what Allison said, but sort of forces me to slow down and say, so what do I really think? Wait, if I'm really just sitting with it and not letting everybody shout at me, how do I personally make sense of whether it's ghosts and issues from my childhood and past, or whether it's what's happening in the world currently? Writing is important for the writer, for everybody who's here on this writer's bridge. That's important, and we need to keep doing it for ourselves. It'll make the world a better place because it'll make us clearer and more compassionate as people. Why, once our writing does go out into the world, it is doubly and triply, 100%, 100 times, depending on how far your writing goes, 1,000,000 times more important, because it helps other people understand the world. It helps other people make sense of the world. It helps other people be compassionate, especially because so many of us write about being different than other people. You know, I'm gay, I'm bi, I'm trans, I'm female, I'm Black, I'm Filipino, I'm disabled in this way. I have an invisible disability. I've survived cancer. I've survived the death of a spouse. We write about these things, people read about them, and they start to understand what other people's struggles and worlds look like, what other people's wants and needs and aspirations are. And that makes for a better world. So yeah, writing is important in a troubled world because it helps to heal us so that we can heal the world, or help to heal the world. And as our writing gets out there in the world, it helps to heal the world. And by the way, excuse me, somebody in chat, I think it was Tisha, excuse me for not knowing how to pronounce your first name, mentioned something about social activism. She's devoting a lot of time to social activism because of where we are in the world. I don't mean to ignore that when I say shut everything off, but it's a choice.
Right.
You want to be more socially active. You want to spend less of your time writing and more of your time out there really trying to affect change. That's wonderful. Do it. Thank you for doing it. But also make a choice. Don't let, I need to volunteer, I need to speak, I need to spread this message. Don't let that take over all of your writing time unless you decide you want to. Just make a conscious choice. How much of your time you're going to spend on what you define as activism, affecting change, and how much of your time you're going to spend on your writing. And as long as you are trying to keep that under control, you're fine.
Marisa asks, speaking of a changing world, if a memoirist is writing their book over a long period of time, let's say 10 years, how should they deal with the societal changes as well as changes in their own opinions from the start to finish? They're afraid of being stuck in a cycle of endless revision. Do you have any suggestions for that?
Ooh, I mean, that depends so much on subject matter and point of view. I mean, some things are so universal, I don't think the changes in the world really change.
Right.
You're writing, it's personal, it's how you reacted, it's memoir, so it's about the past. You don't need to keep up with, but then there are clearly memoirs that have content that is very current to the changing world.
Yeah.
There's no answer. The answer is writing a book is hard. Every book is hard in a different way. What that question addresses is another way writing can be hard. The world does change even as we're writing. Don't get in a spin cycle.
Right.
Just try to write it as strong as you can. And then as you get close to, I think I'm done, start thinking, do I need to make some key changes because it is 2025? Do I need to make some key changes because this just happened in the world? I wouldn't recommend being reactive at every point of the way, because some of those changes and reactions may be unnecessary, and then you're just in a spin.
Right.
Eventually, those flare bottom jeans will come back into style, so don't throw them away yet.
Yeah.
So
Sorry,
this
Al.
also kind of applies to changes in memoir form. Deborah asks, she's seen increased use of dialogue in memoir, but she works with writers who are sometimes afraid to use it when the scene that they were writing was from many years before, even when they're writing their own words. What kind of changes in terms of craft have you seen? And should we be allowed to write dialogue in nonfiction work?
Second part, yes. Okay. The job of writing fiction, the job of writing nonfiction, is to present an experience on the page that the reader experiences as real. I'm in the room. I'm with other people. I'm there as it's happening. I'm feeling it just as the narrator is feeling it. I'm having my own feelings alongside the narrator as to what's happening. So we are using words, an artificial medium, to create a real world. In novels, it's a fictional real world, but you want it to feel like a real world. Real people speak. So if nobody's speaking in your book, it's not going to feel real. Addressing memoir and nonfiction specifically, the reader knows. The reader's going to give you some space here. If you're quoting long, complicated passages where the character in nonfiction, the characters are real, but you have to make your mom into a character because she's existing on the page. Word for word, long speeches, the reader's going to go, how does she remember that so clearly? That also can be very dull. But bits and pieces, as far as dialogue goes, less is more. I want a sense of how your mother spoke. I want a sense of the idioms that she used. I want a sense of where in your dialogue she interrupted you because you were making her uncomfortable. I want a sense of where in her dialogue she interrupted herself because that often indicates something internal unsaid. You can do a lot of subtle things with very small bits of dialogue. And I recommend using smaller bits of dialogue. And the more you remember, especially if it's a tense moment in your life. You might remember what your father said to your mother that night. You might remember what your sister said when she got so upset. But if you're the reader knows, and the reader trusts you that you're doing your darndest to get it right, and that's your job, to do your darndest.
We have a lot of questions in the chat. So let me go ahead and start with Justin's a question for Dinty. How can marginalized queer BIPOC, I don't even know how to say that, disabled.
I think, I don't know.
I
I
don't
say
even
BIPOC, but I just realized, I don't know. I may,
BIPOC, that might make, actually, yeah, that makes
Black
sense.
Indigenous people of color.
Yeah.
Just really fast.
Writers best balance their energy between self-care and writing in this day and age. The current socio-political, socio-economic climate can often feel so hostile to marginalized writers and marginalized voices.
Yeah, boy, I'm the wrong one to answer that. If you can't see, I'm a big old white guy, and though it's breaking my heart what's happening in the world, and bad things can happen to anybody, but I'm actually sitting in a privileged place. My heart breaks for people who are more clearly and immediately at risk from what is happening in the world. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a therapist. I have a heart. Please do take care of yourselves, but I'm not even sure I can honestly give an answer to that. I think,
What I'd advise
other
is
people in your situation might.
people in marginalized communities are getting better and better at forming groups that can lift up each other with some judicious participation from people in positions of privilege as well. And so I think more than anything, those of us who are coming from a position of privilege or a position of power, whether that is class privilege or race privilege or gender privilege or sexuality privilege, any kind of privilege, because each of us has different levers that we can push. And those of us who can help, we should help when we can. And those of us who need help should ask for it. Of course, it's not always your responsibility to ask for help, but the more you are able to reach out and say, hey, if anybody knows of any good groups for this particular type of writer, please tell me about it. Like, for example, I recently met some women who run the Muslim Writers Salon. So I've made a point to tell as many Muslim writers as I know or have ever met that it exists so that they can go be part of it if that's a space they'd like to be in. So it can be really useful to put out there in the world as much as possible. And Justin, I know you're really active about pretty much every webinar I've ever been in. You're really good about reminding us we need examples from writers from different backgrounds. We need to cite books from writers of different backgrounds. And it is great to have you as a conscience voice reminding us to do that. Several years ago, I started making a point that my stock photos in my slides need to show the diversity that I want to see in the writing world. And even just little things like that, it may not come naturally to us, but once we start practicing it for a while, it will start to become the new normal. It will start to become what happens for us regularly. We've got a mark.
Allison's answer was so much better than mine. Sharla, when you edit it, could you put her answer next to my name?
It's not a contest. You did. You both had really great insights, and I agree. Justin often is that voice of conscience, and I also appreciate that in the Craft Talks webinars and such. And I think it's important also to seek out voices that are not voices that you recognize as when you're reading books or you're looking for art experiences that aren't say, oh, that's just like me, but someone that gives you another way of looking at the world. I think as a consumer, that's such a powerful thing that drives the market, to consume voices and ideas and stories that are outside of your experience. It's just a great thing as well, to build empathy in those bridges and also to influence the publishing market.
100%. So speaking of the publishing market, Yolande has a great question. She'd love to know what you think of publishers and agents who are saying memoirs aren't selling right now, or at least they're not acquiring them. Are you hearing this? Do you think it's true? What should a querying memoirist do?
As I've been in the nonfiction world, mainly memoir myself, for 40 years now, and they've always been saying that. So take it with a grain of salt. The big five, or I think it's big four now, New York publishers, consistently turn their back on memoir because it doesn't sell. And then one sells amazingly, and they're like, oh my God, we've just discovered memoir. It's just this, boom and bust cycle. Allison on the Brevity blog recently wrote a piece about how many memoirs have been published lately and done very well, but sometimes they're not called memoir anymore because memoir has expanded from Angela's Ashes, the story of a childhood in Limerick, Ireland, written 40, 50 years after the fact, to all these very, very different current exciting experimental forms. But in the heart, at their heart, they are memoir. And those are still selling. And by selling, it might mean a really nice presentation by a university press. It might mean a really wonderful publication by a small regional press. It might not be backed by all the millions and millions of dollars that Penguin Random House puts behind a few books. They don't put that behind many of their books. But it's still being published. There's still a market for it. There's still a lot of readers for it. So the answer is either very complicated. Go on the Brevity blog, find Allison's post. Remember the title of that post, Allison, or can you put it in the chat?
Oh, it was something about memoir isn't selling, but it depends on how you're counting as memoir.
Yeah.
So
the answer is either very complicated. Find Allison's wonderful post about that, which really details how memoir is still very much alive and growing in exciting ways, or just ignore people who are saying memoir doesn't sell and keep working on your book.
And I want to add on that too. We are to some extent being done a disservice by both publishers and agents who are saying, oh, memoir's not selling right now. or they're saying, I can't sell this without platform. And what they actually mean is, I can't sell this particular book quickly enough so that I can make money off it because agents work for free. So agents work for free until the book sells. And so I don't think I can sell this because you don't have any platform means unless you bring an audience, I am not the right person to get money for this book. Memoirs not selling right now means I cannot immediately think of a person who will give us money for this book. It is not actually a larger statement about the market, which is comforting and good news. What it is someone saying, I can't sell your book, which feels like bad news. But notice also, they're not saying it's terrible. They're not saying, I don't think it's well written enough to sell. When an agent says, I don't think I can sell this, or I don't see a market for this, that is literally what they mean. They mean, I am not the person who can manufacture money from someone else to make this book happen. And so that's why platform is important, not because you need 1 million followers, not because you need to go viral or you need 100 clicks or you need to dance on TikTok, but because you knowing who the audience is helps you identify who is going to give me money for this book. If you have a connection to Illinois, Southern Illinois University Press is specifically looking for memoirs by authors who have a strong Illinois connection. And so if you know that that's your audience, well, that's an opportunity that just opened up for you. And so that's why the Writer's Bridge is about publishing and platform, not because we want you to be on TikTok, but because you need to know who your audience is, because it helps you identify who else wants to reach that audience and will give you money to make it happen.
Yeah.
By the way, everyone, I did just track down that blog post that I was talking about that Allison published a couple of weeks ago and dropped it in the chat.
Thanks, Dinty. We have a question from Susan. She says, this is probably about something you said earlier, most definitely about something you said earlier, but she's wondering, are you saying people should focus on writing blogs or Substack posts and maybe de-emphasize the traditional publication, which takes so long and which is such a long shot? Where should people be concentrating their time, do you think?
All of them are good. So you have choices. That's another way that it's changed. 40 years ago, you either published in a literary magazine, and those were all paper and ink and very poorly distributed. So you had 30 to 40 readers, or you fought for a book deal. Now you have so many more options. Online literary magazines have so much of a bigger reach. Online magazines have so much of a bigger reach now. There is Substack. There are all these sort of magazines that are somewhere between a slick magazine and a literary magazine that reach entirely different audiences. And there's the old-fashioned route of trying to get a big book deal. All of them are good. Think, what do I want? What am I looking for? Am I never going to be happy unless I make $1 million? You probably won't. But if that's the only thing that's going to make you happy, then you have to fight for it. Am I only happy if I reach these particular people? Then find out what magazines those people read. Do I just want a lot of eyeballs? You know, there are magazines that get so many eyeballs. I'm sorry, I'm babbling a little bit. That's what I do. Be deliberate. Think, spend 92% of your time writing and 8% of your time researching the publishing world, and think, where do I want my words to end up? What will make me happy and satisfied? It's easier to publish in online magazines than it is to get a book deal from Penguin Random House. I mean, it's a factor of 1,000,000 to 1 in terms of how hard it is to get a book deal from Penguin Random House versus publishing in an online magazine. But that doesn't make one better than the other. It's really knowing yourself and knowing why you're doing this. If you decide today, I'm not even going to try for a book deal, I'm not even going to go for these big magazines, it's just soul sucking and a waste of my time, I'm happy with these less well-known venues that are exciting and new and fresh, and people are reading them with excitement. And I would say, great, that is a great decision. But you should make the decision for yourself. Don't let the naysayers or the market or chasing the trends determine that for you. You determine it.
And someone mentions that self-publishing is also an option.
People used to turn their nose up and go, "Oh, self-publishing, that's so embarrassing." That's not true anymore. Self-publishing, self-publishing can be very powerful and very satisfying.
I agree.
Do it deliberately and educate yourself, but it's a very viable option.
And one of the things I mentioned in the chat as well is the main challenge with self-publishing is that what they call discoverability is low for books that are self-published, and even some books that are published by small presses. That means people are less likely to magically find your book the way we magically find books that PR people have put in front of us. And so if you are going to self-publish, it's really important to know who your audience is and have a plan to reach them so that you know who needs this book and you can get it directly into their hands.
Right. So do we have any more questions that you see in the chat? It's going by so fast. Oh, we do have a question from Marisa. Dinty, what are your thoughts on what makes, this is a different turn, but what makes it for a great hermit crab essay?
So a hermit crab essay is the short form, an essay written in a different form. It's an essay written as if it were a love letter, an essay written as if it were instructions on how to set the clock on your microwave, an essay that sounds like a legal brief, short and sweet, reductive answer there. It's kind of that magic moment where the experimental form fits the content and you can't force it. So, and people say, well, do you start with the content or the form? I don't even know. Sometimes you start with the content. I want to write about this. And somewhere along the way you go, oh, you know what? What if I wrote this as if it were a hostage, what is it called, ransom note? And you try to go, oh my God, not only is the ransom note a lot of fun, but the work just got more interesting, and I just realized things about the content of my work because it's a ransom note. And sometimes it's the other way around. I'm going to write an essay about my relationship with Luigi as if it were COVID guidelines. That COVID guidelines is a little bit dated, you know, and you start doing it and all of a sudden you realize, you know what, these two really go together. But it can't be forced. I guess I'm going to give the negative answer to that. It's like if it looks too forced, it's not going to work. I think it's probably the way a song comes together. It's like there's the tune, there's the notes. Yeah, I guess poets do this all the time. I'm acting like it's mysterious.
Poetry is mysterious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I understand poetry. It's the poets I can't make sense of.
Right. Stay away from poets.
That's my advice for today.
We have a question from Barbara who says, fractured memoir seems to have become more popular. How crucial do you think it is that writers still carefully define their work's theme? And does the theme have to be visibly present to help readers out? I'm completing I am, and there isn't a clear connection between the chapters and stories, but with the focus being on near death, you care less about that. So,
and that's I am by Maggie O'Farrell.
Okay. Thank you, Allison.
I hate the word theme. Theme is just so ponderous and college professorish, so I don't even use the word theme. So no, I don't think the theme has to be upfront and stated. In fact, stating it, making it too clear to the reader can be dull. Readers like to put two and two together. On the other hand, some connective material, I call it the invisible magnetic river, there's other names for it, has to be in there. But to me, it's a sort of a subtle or more fluid more organic thing. So no matter how fractured a memoir is, no matter how experimentally and disruptively structured a memoir is, that, if the structure is disrupted and the structure is experimental, that can be part of the excitement. But I still want some sense of what is the emotional river running underneath this. But I wouldn't think of it as theme. I don't think of it as theme, because that has, well, I'm repeating myself now. It's in there, but it doesn't have to be stated explicitly. And sometimes stating it explicitly can be dull. Give the reader some credit to find it.
So, Dinty, one of the things I really love about you is that you make all kinds of art. I have seen you make cartoons. Some of your books have napkin drawings in them. Those of us who follow you on Facebook have seen you exploring painting and growing and learning and trying different kinds of painting. Do you find that doing other forms of art intersect with your writing and your teaching? Like, is it a break from those things, or is it something that you think informs your teaching and your writing?
Yeah, it definitely informs my writing. Anytime I stretch or strengthen a new creative muscle, it has a positive effect on whatever I'm trying to do. Some days I wake up and I think I'm teaching writing, and all I want to do is talk about sentences, which is, I can talk about sentences for weeks. Sentences are fantastic. If you like playing with sentences, then you're a writer. Some days I think I wake up and I think, I teach creativity more than I teach writing. And I really want to talk about, where do these ideas come from, and how do we nurture them, and how do we think about them? And that really delicate play between, I'm controlling the idea and I'm giving the idea all the freedom it needs to go in fresh places. I learn a lot from other art forms about how much you can control the idea, the impulse, the material, and how much you have to give the material space to go where it wants to go. And then you have to follow it, especially watercolor, which will go where it wants to go. And you need to just like go, okay, that's where the watercolor wants to go. So I like thinking about creativity. I think it's important, by the way, those of you who don't do this, yeah, you're writers. Yes, you're writing nonfiction, which sounds very utilitarian and serious, but you're artists, and artists play, and artists live in that world between control and release of the material. Sometimes the book takes you where it wants to go. The story takes you where it wants to go. Mm-hmm. So, yes, playing in other art forms can do a lot to inform your writing, and in my case, also my teaching.
I love that. How can writers develop their career at different stages? What would you advise a new writer or writers trying to break out, or an established writer, to do next?
I've done a lousy job of it, so let me tell you. You try stuff, and you try a lot of things, and then the thing you didn't think was going to take off, catch fire, excuse me. The thing you didn't think was going to catch fire and take off is the thing that does. And then that dictates what you do for the next 3 years. And then you look up and you go, what next? And you try a bunch of things. And you don't really know which one of them is going to be the right thing. But after some trial and error, and maybe some periods of hanging your head and saying, oh my God, I can't find anything interesting to do, or I'm so bored, something sort of starts to catch fire and take off, and you follow that for a while. Mm-hmm. I know. I mean, there are smart people that have probably been on Writer's Bridge that can give you smart answers about career choices and structuring your time and building reputation. But, for me, it's been a real clunky, confusing, unexpected, unpredictable sort of path to where I am today as a writer, editor, teacher. I didn't plan most of it. The best things that happened, I fell backwards into. But it's because I kept trying a lot of things. If you just sit at home and don't try anything,
right,
nothing's going to happen.
Yeah, so you got to be willing to be bad at it.
Shake it up every once in a while, especially if you're getting bored or you're getting too tense.
And when in doubt, go to the stationery store, because I'm working on a novel right now. I'm actually on a ship because it's a way to take a writing retreat where I am not as accessible to the world. And I hit a place where I got really stuck today, and I'm like, index cards. I need index cards. That's what's going to solve my story problem.
Whatever it takes, we got to gamify it a little bit, right? You got to
Yeah.
do something. Shake.
Or go to the zoo and think about your book. I'm talking about people who are writing a book that doesn't have a zoo in it.
Mhm.
Go to the zoo, walk around, and just think about your book while you're at the zoo, or the farmer's market, or a subway station, or the feed store. I don't know. Just go places, not places that are in your book and you're researching them. They're just like they're different than the room that you write in. So you're gonna like make different connections in your brain because you turn and you see a polar bear.
Mhm.
Not that the polar bear ends up in your book, but the brain is a funny thing. Synapses are mysterious and wonderful. Give them room to surprise you.
Right.
I love that.
Don't go too near to the polar bear.
Right. Don't get too close. They're smarter than you give them credit for. Um, Darian Shu G said to me recently when we were talking about my writing project, and I thought it was really great, useful advice, is just having the manuscript out and touching it every day and flipping through it. On those days I don't have time to work on it. Just touching it is enough to tell your brain, remember, this is something that you need to be thinking about, even in the recesses of your mind as you're washing dishes and getting other stuff done. And it has been pretty transformational for me. And I can't even tell you why. So that's something everybody could do,
That's great advice.
Right.
I like that. I've also been writing about what I need to write. Like, okay, I know there's a scene. I need this information to come out in it. I need it to start in this location. I need them to travel from here to here. And I'm a big fan of touching the manuscript every day. Dinty, Judith wants to know, what is the derivation of your name? And I know I have heard this story, but not everybody has heard this story. And we would love to hear this story before we give our top tips of the day.
Comic strip character. It's an Irish name. There are Dintys in Ireland. It's not a common name at all. More common than Dinty is the name Dinny, which is kind of a derivation of Denny. And it's somewhere between, Gaelic and English or Irish and English. But in the 1920s, a comic strip character named Dinty Moore became so prominent in a strip called Bringing Up Father. And it was a bit of an Irish slur, or at least a good-natured teasing of the Irish American immigrant experience. But it became a really popular character and thus a popular name. And for reasons that my mother could never fully explain, because she didn't want to explain, she thought it'd be a good name for her, Beaming Baby Boy.
I love it. I love it. So in just a moment, we're going to give everybody our top tips for 3 things that you can do today to move into the changing publishing world in 2025. But before we do that, Dinty, what are you really excited about that's coming up for you this year? You're teaching a webinar for Craft Talks. You're teaching an intensive with me. You and I are going to be on a ship on the Queen Mary 2 in August next year. What are you most excited about in 2025 for your work?
Those 3 things. Hanging out with Allison. I'm amazed at how Allison's mind works. Those of you who are not new to Writer's Bridge, who've been around for a while, she knows so much and she expresses it so clearly, and she expresses it very differently than I do. We come at it from different sides and always end up agreeing. So yeah, I'm teaching a craft talk on January 15th about the complicated, sort of a deep dive into layering details. There's a lot of different kinds of details, and if you can layer them, it's going to make for a more interesting experience for your reader. We're doing an intensive on memoir, big and small, later on in January, and then we're going to ride on the Queen Mary sometime next summer. I hope don't all of you join us on the Queen Mary. The ship will start to go like this a little bit. I hope
All
some
the
of you,
writers tend to tilt.
I hope some of you can join us on some of those events.
It would be really, really nice to see you. It would be really, really nice to see you. So, folks, we always leave you with our top tips. 3 things, one from each of us, that you can do today to move forward into writing in these changing, turbulent, unusual times. Sharla, what is your top tip? What can our community do today to move forward in their writing into 2025?
Yeah, I really love this topic. And I know if it's a tip, it's more anecdotal, but recently I came across The Artist's Way, a book focused on creative self-work, described as a spiritual path to higher creativity. And I know that many people know this book. They're probably familiar with it. It is over 30 years old, but I started on a whim, not intentionally, but on the week of the US presidential election. And it's been guiding me through these past months, especially in my latest project. And I think of it. Oh, there's a bit of echo. Sorry. A space for meditation and being present. It's helped me immensely. And if you're looking for a way to focus on your writing or find your place in the world without the noise of everything that is anxiety reading, creating, this or something similar might be a valuable practice to you, is to find a way just to bring in being in art, whether it's, visual or written art or whatever it is. To bring it into your daily experience so that you can be more centered about your own work.
I love that. I'm going to say that my thing is the pause. From the book about French parenting, Bringing Up Bebe. Can you, before you reflexively get on the internet, can you, before you reflexively pick up something to comfort yourself with, can you take that pause and ask yourself, is this what I need right now? Or in fact, would I rather be writing right now? Is there something else that I would rather be doing other than this reflex, until you can train yourself into a different reflex? And you can train a reflex, because for many years when I was a street performer, even though I do not really care for children, all of your children are wonderful. It's those other people's children that I don't care for. But when you are performing in public on the street and then walking around in public on the street, you cannot look askance at people's crying babies. And so I practiced for many years. When a baby cries, I look over and go, "Oh, poor little fella, how's he doing?" This now happens to me automatically. When I get on an airplane and a baby starts wailing, I look over kindly at the parents with a big smile, and I genuinely feel sympathy in my heart. So actively train your reflexes, train it out of news and anger and irritation and into conscious community effort, into your writing, into your fellowship with both the people who you have something in common with, and making a point to reach out to the people with whom you have less in common. Dinty, what's your top tip for the day?
Self-care, nothing new about that, but specifically apply that to the writer you. There's so much anxiety around writing. There's so much anxiety about, am I doing it right? There's so much anxiety about, am I good enough? And then there's the little anxieties like, should I use dialogue? Should I use 2 spaces after a period? Should I double space or single space? Am I allowed to use adverbs or not? On events like this Writer's Bridge and other talks that I give, people are so anxious about so many things. And ask yourself, like, when am I having fun as a writer? How can I create? I'm having fun, feeling in the groove, feeling confident. Try to identify those moments, and how can you create more of them? Don't let the anxiety be the center. Let the fun or freedom be the center. The other things won't go away, but at least they won't dominate.
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for joining us today and every year. I'm going to remove our pins so that we can see everyone, because we invite you to take a moment and unmute yourself for a joyful goodbye. We are so thankful to be part of the Writer's Bridge community, to have you all here. Happy writing, everybody, and Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank you
everyone.
all
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so
Allison,
much.
Sharla.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Happy
Thank
holidays.
Bye, everyone.
you. Happy running 2025.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.